Welcome to Beyond the Counter, the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the UK's food hall industry. I'm your host, Simon Anderson, operator, consultant, and someone who's spent more than a decade obsessed with food, place, and the people shaping both. Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Counter. This is a slightly different episode than we really had before, but where we focus on operators and vendors. For this episode, we're really getting underneath the skin of what it needs to build and design food halls. So with us today, we have two people who are very experienced in that sector and have probably worked on as many food halls as any single operator has actually done. So today we have Mike Sinclair of Macaulay Sinclair and Fred Carr of MorganCarr. Very useful. You both got your own names and your own companies, so that's kind of helpful. Did sound like a lawyer's office here, the four of you sitting there. But what would be great to just start off with is just a brief intro from both of you, just on yourselves and your companies, and then we'll sort of deep dive into everything else.
You want to go first?
Yeah. So Fred Carr from MorganCarr, we are project cost consultants and sort of regulatory consultants. So we deal with delivery of the projects, the nuts and bolts. And I think I've been involved in doing what I'm doing for the last sort of 30 years. And kind of, I guess I started getting involved in hospitality with the coffee boom, Cafe Nero, which is still a client of ours. And then, you know, the sort of Jamie Oliver thing was doing with the food, and I delivered huge number of the Carluccio's projects, and then set up MorganCarr about 13 years ago. And we still do sort of coffee shops. We do kind of various different rollouts, a lot of them with Mike's company. And then the larger format kind of type of projects. So competitive socializing, and of course food halls as well.
Mike Sinclair from Macaulay Sinclair. So myself and my business partner are based in Nottingham. We have over 20 years worth of experience in the hospitality industry. That's all we've done straight out of university. We're sort of specializing in loving entertainment, socializing and eating, of course. Lucky enough within that time to have worked with some great premium brands, Dishoom, Hawksmoor, where I was just last night for an opening. And
thanks for the invite.
And on the back of that, we've also, of course, worked on a number of food halls as well with Fred, and been lucky enough to sort of implement 2 or 3 in the last couple of years.
Cool. And so specifically, so I know that you've worked on arcade and box hall, and Fred, you've worked on a few more, really.
Yeah, box Park, Shoreditch, Wembley. Box hall with Mike, arcade with Mike, and then another couple of arcades and Curb, and then a few other ones. We did one with Sainsbury's and Baparan at the back of Code as well. So
brilliant.
Yeah,
okay, cool. So I think what's the hope for today is to really get underneath the skin of what's important when you're designing, building, thinking about costing food halls, and also how they can differ from traditional hospitality businesses. Because I think what we kind of still forget about the food hall industry, that it's still relatively quite young. I mean, it's probably 7-8 years old.
Yeah.
I think we're going through a massive sort of growth spurt at the moment, and I think it'd be really interesting for people to think about how you approach a project and what you need to be aware of, what you need to consider, and what mistakes to kind of look out for. So with that in mind, I mean, so when you get approached from people about this sort of area, what are the first things you kind of think? How is it different from, say, a traditional hospitality project that you may have done? What are the things that first come to mind that you want to achieve, and what are the things that you highlight with clients they need to consider when they start a food hall project?
So in my experience, first one we did was arcades. That's 2022. And then a lot has developed since that. There are a number of different types of food halls that we know about. Arcade, for instance, and a German food hall that we're currently on site with in Frankfurt at the moment are a bit more design-led food halls, a bit more stylistic, lifestyle interiors. There are box hall, which is perhaps more of a monochromatic palette, a bit more formulaic in its sort of approach, but is probably a little bit more akin to Time Out, that probably a lot of people know about.
Yeah.
And then there are sort of more eclectic type of food halls like Chelsea Market in New York, etc., which or Mackie Mares, for example, which is is a lot more of a marketplace, has a very different vibe. So I think in terms of the type of food halls, that's what I start to think about, with regards to the client in terms of the vibe and the briefing for that sort of thing, amongst a whole heap of other practical issues that obviously need to come throughout the build. They are generally very large sites, ranging between 12.5 to 20,000 square foot. So big sites, generally complex, and they come with nuances depending upon the site with regards to fire regulations and landlords and all that other stuff that sort of features into that. So we're very mindful that this isn't a stereotypical 5,000 square foot independent that might be doing a restaurant here. This is a much bigger beast that we're sort of generally dealing with, large numbers, large occupancies. So it comes with its complexities. They're the sort of initial things I start to think about.
Yeah. And I suppose, Fred, that's where you come in, because a lot of those complexities actually come down to the execution, whether it's the build, the cost, the price, the project planning. So how when you approach this, how is it different from your mindset from that?
Well, I think it's like I said, it's just it's complex. Usually, typically a lot of the clients are entrepreneurial with really grand ideas and their own take on the food hall model. So there's a real kind of excitement, with what was trying to deliver. Arcade was really exciting at the time. It was kind of like really sort of something new. So there's big excitement. There's lots of there's so much that the client's trying to achieve, and yet the complexities, the technical side of it, the landlord, the lease, the budget, the costs, and the build, the technical aspect of the build. So I guess people probably don't realize how early or how long before you get to site all of that happens. And trying to establish just those fundamentals, just thinking back, those first days on site when you're just trying to look at this huge exciting space and figure out how the hell you're going to make that work.
And more often than not, the sites that clients are looking to take, these size of sites with architectural interest, they want people to attract them to. In conservation areas, there are listed buildings. So Arcade was, 1960s modernist building, and came with a lot. You cannot do this. So trying to heat and cool a space, or trying to sort of make run services in a space where you can't run simple things like cabling on ceilings, because the exposed ceiling, as you recall, had to be completely left as well. So a raised floor, everything's upside down. So all the services in that particular instance are in the floor, and everything came up rather than traditionally, obviously, being around the ceiling and you'd be coming down. So it's that. Vauxhall is a sort of an Edwardian shopping mall, 1912, 14,000 square foot. But again, that's the old site of the Metropolitan Railway. So there is an underground station underneath that. So
it's right underneath it. You just wouldn't believe.
It's the same where Market Hall's Victoria. That's an old cut and cover tube station. So actually, if you go to the roof and look down, you can see onto the train and the platform. So it's right on top. And that was a kind of there was a cable going across the roof, and we were like, what's all this cabling? Can we remove this cable?
Cut it and find out.
TfL came back and said, yeah, you can remove it. And then we got a panicked call going, don't cut it. Because it turned out it was all the signals and all the signs for the whole of the build. Right. So it's like crazy when you take these sites on. It's just just adds a level of complexity that
and I think
you're not even aware of.
From Fred's point of view, there's a lot of risk. I think that's that contingency, that risk that you need in place. You need to really early on do your homework to do some risk analysis and start to investigate the site, from its structural, its acoustics, fire, all the life safety stuff is incredibly important. Of course, we want to create a majestic, creative place for people to go and enjoy themselves, but a lot of the cost is inherently in the infrastructure and generally back of house stuff that the clients don't see.
Yeah, because that's what I touch on that, and sort of what the people underestimate, and people just don't comprehend that when you're building something of such size and complexity and scale, that everything is just amplified, isn't it? So if you're building a 2,000 square foot restaurant or a 5,000 square foot restaurant, okay, your kitchen is your kitchen and your front of house can be easily managed. But with this, you're replicating it across in terms of multiple kitchens, multiple ways of egress. You've got different kinds of extraction and all different kinds of stuff. So where from when people approach you for the first time, what mistakes are they making? What's the kind of awareness should they be thinking about? And when they're looking at sites and when they're planning buildings, what are the things that sort of create red flags for you?
I think that there's a tendency for people to go to the sites that we've mentioned and understand that it comes with a level of sort of resource and manpower and intelligence that goes in that. But I think they underestimate actually sort of how much goes into that from day one. I think there's a tendency to look at these and think, oh, it's relatively straightforward. But to go into these sites with your eyes open, I think you start to inform them. You've got like Vauxhall, for example, it's being built in the city of London in that site. It's outside Liverpool Street. All of the sort of the comings of building just anything in that location sort of adds an extra layer of cost, and it's that starts to get amplified. And as you say, very shortly you're finding yourself that a budget that you had assigned to what you thought was this finger in the air, is turned on its head. Yeah,
and Fred, how do you approach that process? Because I suppose that from the cost planning and the project management side that you do, you work on. So, for anyone that doesn't know, so Mike, you'll get the design and the brief, and you'll design something you think that from an aesthetic point of view, but also from a practical, like in terms of layout and number of kitchens, number of covers, all of those kind of elements. Then that gets handed to sort of Fred's role, and then he really kind of price ups everything that's involved in that. So,
well, we try and work collaboratively all the way through the design. It'd be foolhardy for us to spend an awful lot of time to get something on paper to pass it over to Fred for a cost analysis of this thing, and it just doesn't meet the client's budget, business model, expectations. So trying to make sure that the budget is aligned with the design is a real challenge. And working with MorganCarr and Fred, as we have done over a number of years, we sort of rain check, that sort of these costs, square meterage rates, manpower, what's available for us. So we'll forge this as part of the brief. It's not just a creative brief; there'll be a numerical brief as well.
Yep.
I think so. I think you would find a site, and there's a huge amount of work to establish the feasibility of that space, and that probably goes back to the appetite for the landlord, the ambition of the client. Obviously, the resources between them. The way that deal might happen, and to make sure that the building can work. So you're shoehorning a food hall. Well, there's no perfect space for a food hall. It's always shoehorned into an awkward space or a building that's not designed for that. So there's a lot of work to try and figure out how you can get a space just to get to a level to be enabled for that model, and that might have commercial aspects to it, and that all needs to be worked out. Then you come up with this is what we think the model is. And then that sort of adds to the brief for the design around, well, then how do we get the concept into that with what we've got available or left over, should I say.
And the floor planning solution I think is very different for a food hall than a traditional restaurant. When we do the floor plan for a restaurant, we're always trying to sort of dictate where the customer flow will be, where the customers are going to be, where you want them to sit, interact, routes to the toilets, fire escapes, and all that stuff. And you can control that in a way with the layout, the bar, the furniture layout, etc. In a food hall, we're talking about a lot of people coming at different directions, mainly at the same time.
Yeah.
So you end at these peak times, sort of morning and sort of afternoon and evening for drink. And you can have as many as a couple of hundred people descending on this sort of at one time.
Yep.
So being able to control flow is a very different proposition then. And of course, you have 13, 14 kitchens and people are trying to find their way in terms of what they're after. Great. There's great diversification in terms of where they can go and what they can choose. But it's like mad ants running around this thing. So that's a challenge.
And when you get a new project, I mean, you're both quite lucky in the fact that the people you have worked with are kind of box park arcades. These are kind of well-established sort of hospitality people. But when you first go and see a site for the first time, what is it that goes, oh my God, we've got to think about this? What are those things that probably, as a creative person who owns the business, sees a site and thinks, oh, this is going to be amazing? What's the first thing that you go, oh God, that's how we're going to sort that problem? What's that problem going to be? What are the things that the operator and the creative person doesn't see that you probably see that you see from a build and a delivery perspective?
I see sometimes an architecturally interesting site that doesn't stack up in terms of its fire egress or its thermal capacity or its heating and cooling. So some of the practicalities tend to get overlooked because they're in awe of the beautiful space. It's great to have exposed brick and exposed cast iron columns and really big high ceilings. And all that architectural character, but you've still got to heat and cool that space. You've still got to create a safe environment for people to eat and dine in and enjoy themselves, to light space. And these big spaces, from Fred's point of view, is just more square meterage. More square meterage. The finishes, floors, walls, ceilings, lighting, it just becomes more of a challenge. So I think just managing expectations on budget initially, on some of that real important stuff. Of course, we get excited about sort of the wonderful sort of volumetrics that we have of these spaces, but trying to sort of just keep them sort of practically minded on that stuff is important.
Yeah. I mean, you've probably the same, seen so many of these spaces that you've walked around and it's exciting, and these incredible buildings, and you're just trying to figure out how it's going to work. But there's so many that I've seen that just never going to make it.
When you're working with the clients in that sort of basis, and the buildings are so different, but you want to create an identity and a feel that's sort of coercive for the brand itself. How do you approach those sort of challenges?
Every site and every brand has their challenge, and I find that the guys in the office, they really thrive on that sort of creativity and individuality. We're doing this with our new client in Germany, District Market, which is again very different than those two sites. And that's a new brand, which is just starting off. When we worked with Arcade Food Theatre, that was a new brand as well. So I think we were all learning initially. You've gone on to do.
There is that whole journey about trying to create something different, new. It's not like the same thing every time, and everyone's got a different take on what they're trying to achieve.
And I think there's a different take on not just the design, but also on the offer. So, Arcade, best in class, world class for food cuisine with a couple of local heroes. I mean, that was initially what it was set up to be. Very different than Boxhall. A lot of local heroes in there, and some of the District Market that we're working on at the moment is a little bit more chef led. So there are almost restaurants within these spaces now, within a market sort of environment. So again, there's a slight deviation in conceptually what types of food halls these are, not just in terms of design. But they've got to respond to that as well. And more often than not, I think the clientele, the customers are similar. I mean, that's the beauty of a food hall, is you can go as a group of 10, 20 people. You can go as an individual. It's a meeting place. It's essentially it's a market square, isn't it? Where you go and you meet people, and you feel just as comfortable. You should do. That's the challenge, as eating on a communal table, as in a table for two on your own, or with a larger party. And I think that's the attraction of the food halls, and the attraction of the diversification of the type of food that there is. So and I think also it's very different. I think now people are a lot more savvy about the type of food that they eat. And there's a lot of sharing as we goes to going on. If we were going out, we'd probably have some small plates and try a little bit. It's not like this is my food, that's your food, sort of stuff. So that has the ability as well for us to sort of, communally sit and have that sort of nice sort of sharing.
But trying to get that into a design so that everyone has all of those experiences, maybe at different times and different spaces in the place is, a big challenge, right? From a design.
Design and operation. And I think that there are still conversations that we have with those guys and the guys we're working with now on just simple things like, how do you order your food? And where is the food presented?
Yeah.
How does it arrive at you? Do you go and get it? Those simple activities there's still conflict of interest on who, I think, which one prefers which, and which one is more successful. I think that does sort of lend itself to the type of sort of food hall as well that you're genuinely eating in.
Yeah, I mean, you are seeing a layering of different kinds of food halls. So I think you're seeing, a lot of sort of regeneration-led sort of cheaper food halls that can be done in sort of on the fly. And then, but the quality and the tiering, particularly the sites that you work with, you have to think of that whole delivery aspect in terms of operation, delivery, tech, food to the table, which again isn't always thought through completely.
It's also not necessarily perfect either. All of that stuff is just a challenge. And I mean, your curb's pretty good. They just keep it simple. Just buzzer, pick up.
That is. But again, the tech-based stuff works as well for other people as well. If you've got a site that's difficult and you got people over different floors, again in different spaces to find stuff where you can't get all of the food on show, then there's lots of different ways to actually make it work to suit the project and suit whatever it is. Well, because a lot of the time you'll find yourself sort of, must be difficult because I've worked with both of you as a client, so I know how difficult it can be because I was on the other side. You're kind of sitting between the dreams of the operator and the creative vision they've got, and then the actual execution, the sort of the data, the physical manifestation of that, and that can't always happen the way that the kind of the operator wants it to happen. How do you manage that? How do you mitigate those issues, or do you just ignore them and not do them, or do you actually just, or do you?
Well. There's I guess there's managing. It's more of a journey. I mean, it seems like there's so much that goes into these spaces, and there's so many of these operational design, technical, financial elements. And it normally, I mean, think about the food halls that we're working on. They span years, and so there's an emotional journey that goes on, and there's compromises that need to take place. There's changes that need to take place. Life stuff happens, and things are always changing. And I think that's probably, the same as a food hall. A food hall is this flexible, be everything for everyone space. And there's always that element of flexibility, especially with these sort of entrepreneurial clients trying to make it work. So you're always, sort of, I guess, open to that change, and always trying to solve and help solve those challenges as they come through.
Yeah, I think flexible is the key. You often hear the client saying, "Oh, I want the option for this to be cleared out and to be in an event space. I want the idea, to be put a gig on. I like the idea of sort of corporate events, or BMW are going to take this. I want to wheel a car in. I want it to be an art gallery one day." So it constantly tries to reinvent itself to attract people to it, to make it unique and make it different each time they go. So, it doesn't sort of feel like too monotonous. It's a meeting plate. It's a social hub for people to go and enjoy themselves there. So I don't think that the expectations are that it wants to be this, but I think that there is a real grown-up sort of thought that this thing is going to evolve. Let's just see where this sort of goes, and we need to sort of move with it. So flexibility is important, not just from layout, but AV, IT, anything like that is incredibly important for those things to sort of facilitate it.
Yeah, and where does that work from people managing that sort of client side of it? And again, we touched on budgets a little bit earlier, but what are those sort of what are the major sort of cost drivers in a food hall build? I mean, not those are, but where do people often lose sight of where it is, and where do budgets start to go wrong on that side? If there's a vision and a dream of the operator, but then when you're trying to execute it, then it can spiral.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of people miss that they're sort of developing or creating a space that their offer can fit into. So typically, enabling a space, shell enabling, doing what it needs to do to make it, right. And that might be a landlord cost, or it might be something that just you need to, invest to make it work, structural things. So that is always a piece that is always lost. And then you get all of these fixed costs in the space. You've got kitchens, big cost of kitchens. You've got all the mechanical services, all of that stuff is a huge percentage of the build. So you've got all of these, I guess, fixed numbers of technical, elements of a food hall to make it work. And then you've got design, and arguably the design is probably the bit that can be flexible. So, you really need to look after all of these other elements to allow yourself to have a design that isn't then, kind of, sort of compromised at the end, and your offer is watered down.
So in the projects you're doing, what if we were to break those down by percentages, what if someone's thinking about it, what kind of percentage of a budget will go to things like M&E and extraction and all that?
I think services probably of the overall capex, so that's sort of build, directs, fees, acquisition, the whole thing. Probably about 30% of that is mechanical services.
Wow! And how does the other 100 break down? It's quite interesting to.
Yeah, well, then you've got again you've got. Percentage wise, have to work that back, but there's a big sort of lump sum cost of kitchens. And then you've got maybe 50% of that is 50% of the whole thing is build, and then you've got a huge amount of direct supply items, which includes kitchen furniture, feature lighting, IT, EPOS, all of those kind of things, sound system, all of those, and then you've got fees. And then acquisition, just getting hold of the site, buying the space, and then you've got, a big portion of pre-opening costs to actually get the thing open. Staffing costs is a huge number typically.
We've had a number of, not run-ins, but we've had a number of conversations where Fred's presented this and design is like 2%.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do with that? No. But you're right. There is the thought, isn't there, that there is a flexibility. The design is the flexible part of that, sort of, because some of those startup costs, some of the engine room infrastructure costs are genuinely fixed. You've got 13 kitchens, you've got 13 extraction systems. Filtration. Yeah. You've got planning restrictions, which can really sort of.
It's a really technical, difficult thing to do, a food hall, and they're probably a lot of people totally underestimate the whole thing, and you need to have your eyes wide open, and with a very good team to be able to really understand how that all works, to be able to get value out of that whole process.
Yeah, and I think one thing people underestimate is the consumer. It's the fact that the consumer is the same consumer who is going to a casual dining restaurant or a high-end restaurant, or that they're expecting the same feel, vibe, experience, even though they're coming to a food hall. For them, the differentiator they see is choice. It's not the fact that they feel they should be in any lesser of a space. So you've still got to hit those kind of same levels of what is, because for me, when I go to a food hall, and you can tell where they've skimped on certain points, and to me, it's always extraction, where you could just, if you go to a normal restaurant, you never smell the kitchens, but if you walk into a building, you can smell the kitchens, that there's some corners have been cut, and I think that happens quite a lot when you go into certain spaces, and you get that sort of sense of it.
And similarly, you're right; those touch points are important for it. They feel like they want to go there for value for money, so. You go in there, there's traditionally a lot of hard surfaces. The dwell time in a food hall is sometimes expected not to be as anywhere near as you would be in a traditional restaurant. So soft furnishings or premium types of furniture that's going to stand the test of time. The general thought is that this is a really sort of industrial, really hard environment, needs to have longevity in their finishes and robust in their detail. Well, sometimes that sort of jars with the actual vibe that you're trying to create there.
Yeah.
So that can also be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and what's as well is the is the split between drink and food as well. I mean, a lot of these places, the majority, it's a 50-50, 60-40 split for bar as well. So you need that, the kind of that elements of coming through from it. In terms of just when people are doing that sort of planning, do you work to sort of set, do you have bands of cost per 1,000 per square foot or meter that people need to be considering when they're looking to fit outs? Do you tier it in sort of different levels, or what's the kind of figure that you're coming to that people need to be considering if they want to create something that's of a high level or a lower level that's more accessible?
So I would have a conversation with Fred, and we would discuss, the looks level, of what this type of interior would be. We'd probably benchmark a few that we're aware of, nationally, internationally. That could be some look and feel imagery that we do. We do a lot of research on any project that we do. And that's something that we share and collaboratively do with the client to make sure that they understand what it is they're going to inherit. But that early work in terms of benchmarking what type or vibe, a type of level of fit out is an important aspect to slide across to Fred, to start to then sort of look at the bigger picture in terms of the size of the site and where some of that might get proportioned.
Yeah, I mean there are values that you can apply, and a lot of boardrooms stick a number on it and say, well, it should be that based on the cheapest one they've managed to do in the past, and they're usually a couple of years out of date as well. So I think you look at each one individually, and if you're looking at a 25,000 square foot site, you can get that number per meter squared much more aligned with what the target might be in the boardroom. Whereas if you get a smaller site that needs all of these technical things, planning and that number goes much higher. So they're a bit dangerous, sort of just putting this is how much it's going to be, and then you've got all of these other facets. So we would try and do that early on and just establish what the cost would be for each space.
And also ring fence like there is on every site. Some of the USB or some of the risk items, it's all well and good saying, we can transfer that rate across that site, but this site doesn't have a shop front. This site doesn't have any acoustics either. This site doesn't have any electric capacity, so we have to apply for that. So some of the fundamentals to enable this thing. So those big infrastructures, big startup costs are unique for each project. So it's pretty bespoke. You can transfer some of this rates across, but there will be some standout items that naturally come through.
Yeah, so it's just expensive then. So you're not gonna. Is that what people think?
I mean, I guess sort of 300 to 500, pounds per square foot kind of thing, and more towards the 500 typically. I mean, costs have gone up. So much, out of the back of COVID with inflation, construction costs have gone up, and it seemingly is, more challenging than ever to build. So there's the cost of how much a food hall is, but there's also just trying to capture the increase of material costs and inflation.
And let's not forget, these are thousands of square foot sites, so that's the build time is long. So you've got contractors on site for 20, 30 weeks. It's a long time. A lot of prelims, a lot of site attendance. It's that sometimes as well is, what comes with a bigger site is a bigger build time.
And in terms of, you touched on there in terms of Shell & Core and the relationship between the developer and the operator and the sort of landlord. I mean, sort of just after COVID, then there was a lot of hunger from landlords to try and get people in. Are you still seeing that now? Is the landlords and the owners of the building still helping to sort of fund builds, or is it flips more towards?
I think so. I think there's always. I think there's a lot of people that have now done food halls, and it's got all of these challenges, and even operation when we've left and they're operating, it's still a challenge, as you know. So I think there needs to be that collaboration with landlord and tenant, and there needs to be help and working that out. And there's also usually a grander vision with a food hall. It's not just about the food hall. Maybe there's a housing development that needs to go off the back of it, or it's got a bigger kind of a grander plan beyond just a food hall. It needs to do more than that, and that normally ties in with the landlord, the developer. This is the key for whatever they're trying to look at.
Yeah, there's two sides. You have those which has a regeneration of, a wider sort of site area. Great. And then you have some landlords who are a little bit wet behind their ears, and they feel that I've seen a food hall there and this is a beautiful space. Why don't we do that? And then all of a sudden, it just won't work for so many different reasons. So educating them, those type of landlords can be a little frustrating sometimes, because there is a tendency for them to be a little rough shot. Oh, we can do that. It's not a problem. But those bigger site-wide context sites, they're big beasts. Big numbers we're talking there.
Yeah, that's my big fear is that people see big space. Oh, what's a big solution?
Yeah,
food hall. But then you go, but that big space you've got is in a small town, or is in a town where you haven't got the footfall, or you haven't got the presence. So it's not always the solution that's automatically going to work for everyone. Yeah. What we're seeing more now as well is within a food hall or with ancillary things around it. And I just say how much are you seeing this? So we're seeing a lot of competitive socialising, seeing co-working, different kind of elements. Are you seeing more of that coming through over the last couple of years, or does that get factored into your projects now?
Absolutely. So in those larger projects where there is the availability of space, there is the ideal. There's a place in Nottingham, for example, where our studio is, very large. I think it's the largest regeneration area, just at the side of the train station there. And that's hit a little bit of a stumbling block just with the sheer size and the amount of investment that's going to be needed in this. You can attract all manner of things there. It could be Paul Smith's museum. It could be a rally museum, for bikes, because that's what originated out of Nottingham. Co-working, 2 or 3 hotels, the ice arena, a Christmas market. There's all of this thing that sort of people want that to be. Fundamentally, money is the crux of that. But it's not that there's not the desire for these things to exist, and there's certainly the appetite for people to go and live in these places. A lot of build to rent opportunities, and people like the idea of having that community on their doorstep. I think is a real appeal. So definitely, that's about.
Yeah, I think all of these things are heading in that direction where it's a blend. They blend together. Kind of even retail with that's going in a more of a experiential type of space, so that could fit in with that sort of idea. I think people they look for this third space, the community.
I just saw an amazing thing that Nike's just built of this and that, where they've it's like a sports space, an art gallery. It's in East London. It looks absolutely amazing in terms of what they're doing from there. But what's quite interesting for both of you, though, is you've mentioned that you're working on projects in Germany, and Fred, you worked on the Curb in Berlin.
Yeah.
How is that? So lots of UK brands are looking to growth across the rest of the UK, and that's kind of easy. You can find a local contractor, you can go for that route. So how has that transition across been going to work in Europe? How does that entail in terms of what the difference is, and what should people be aware of if they're looking to make that move?
It's really challenging.
Well, I think Germany is a difficult space. I think maybe which is where Curb was, and that did feel like it was we were up against it from just from a build perspective, and understanding the local market and the culture, but also just trying to explain what it is that we're trying to do over there. Food hall wasn't an easy conversation, just trying to explain to them how that works, what we've done. We have to get everyone over to London so they could actually see what it is that we're explaining to them.
A food hall really doesn't exist in Germany. It's a food court.
Yeah,
it's a very different concept. And as a result of that, we're busy now trying to create food halls in Germany, because there is definitely an appetite for it. We're fortunate that our new client is local, they're German, so they understand what is been done here in London as an example. So that curb going there is a slightly different proposition, but the price of the build is exponentially higher. We've found that some of the technical issues with regards to sort of fire retardancy of just simple things like wood and timber in hospitality environments is through the roof. So there are a lot harder building regulation restrictions and building restrictions actually on site there. Yeah. So that's really pushed the cost up.
I suppose that's cost they're used to, though, if they're already used to that market. But then it'd be a shock if you're coming from here in terms of
exactly correct. Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then sort of where you see a lot of councils and a lot of the UK in terms of looking for this sort of aspect and design and different apps that, where do you see food doors playing their role in that sort of regeneration element, where you both worked on projects where you've kind of been at the forefront of that? So how are you seeing that pan out for people?
Well, the thought is they can give back to, for employment, of course, and for, I mentioned earlier, like local heroes, so startup businesses. I mean, a lot when we worked with Arcade in the early days, it was meant to be an incubator for, for new food concepts, for new ideas, for young up and coming foodies to come. And it was, the kitchen was put on for them. They would rent the space. They would see how successful it is. And then ideally this would then be a platform for them to go and become their first restaurant, wherever that may be, their first startup. I think that also kind of exists as well in these regeneration areas where you do have that local talent and someone who is really looking to start up that sort of stuff. Employment is a major factor to that as well. And also just trying to, I mentioned Nottingham because obviously that's where we're from, but there's a lot of pockets of space that lie dormant.
Yeah.
And there is, almost certainly the demand and the customer clientele that exists within that space. So it is really important.
And again, you got great food all in Worthing, haven't you? Now, based on
there is one, yeah. The one we've got sessions in Brighton. So I think they and we do get inquiries for lots of kind of town centre regeneration. People see that as the new town square, bringing food in, and people, generally people really want it. People, would love that and support it. So it's just, I guess, trying to see how that would manifest and work. We've, the back of our offices in where we sort of created these markets. Saturday markets and just with lots of food trucks and stuff like that, and just to sort of again see how that works. And again people just love those kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. So just before we sort of finish it, so I think what would be quite interesting, because we might have people listening to this who are thinking about doing a food or have never done it or haven't done it to the kind of the level and with the kind of executions that you guys have done. So what would you advise people to
come and see Fred and I?
Yeah, well, of course, come and see Fred if they can afford the fee element of your things. But what from the design, what do they need to consider with the brief? What do they need to be great to what do they need to get right in their heads, those points of view? And then from your side, Fred, in terms of when you're looking at a space and looking at a site, what do you need to think of in terms of how much this is going to cost you and how much you need to think about before you can approach and even getting close to doing a build? So what should people be thinking about, and what should they be delivering and executing?
I think you can't underestimate how much work you can do in the early stages. That's before acquiring the site. That's really understanding the concept and the brand. I think that's absolutely key. What's going to set yourself apart from the competition? I mean, hospitality industry is incredibly fierce. It's incredibly expensive to run. Very exciting place, but nevertheless, that early stage in terms of understanding what it is that we are, even a brief in itself that we can then start to sort of have some really early dialogue with is incredibly important. It's all well and coming to us, with us and saying, well, we have this amazing space, and you're going, wow, this is amazing. What is it? I'm not too quite sure. Yeah, well, I thought I'd sort of like a little bit of arcade and a bit of this and a bit of that. I think a lot earlier thoughts on that side of stuff. I think they should talk to people in the industry and sort of learn from their mistakes and sort of success to make sure that that's really well aligned as well. And start to have some meaningful dialogue with, I think, professionals who sort of can offer opinion and give them some real simple guidance on simple things that could cost them an absolute fortune. Risks to diverse or negotiations with landlords before they enter into these deals is incredibly important.
Yeah. I think, eyes wide open. It seems to be the location is, one of the big key aspects of a successful food hall. They're big spaces. It needs to be in the right place to make it work. And so patience, I guess, finding that space and understanding that it's a long haul and there's going to be probably lots of disappointment along the way, and what they probably would love to happen probably won't happen. And there's a long journey to really get through that. So someone with that capacity and boldness, to be able to execute that and to see that through is what they need to go forward, I think.
Cool. And then finally, just to wrap up, that was quite interesting, is what one food hall do you admire that you've not actually worked on or built or had anything to do with? What's your favourite food hall out there?
I don't know whether you would class it as a food hall, but I like the Tin Building in New York.
Okay.
I think it's really interesting because that has a mix of restaurants in a marketplace. You can go and buy your goods, your fish, or all that other stuff, but it's in a really cool building, great design, great ambience, different types of design in different pockets of things. So I think it's got real layered interest. So I find that really sort of eye-catching, good looking place.
I like it when I go to a festival and I see that these kind of environments get made in the in the middle of a festival. They can create all of the things we're trying to achieve over a weekend.
Yeah.
And you get these incredible food courts with music and people, everything that we're trying to achieve in one space, for next to nothing.
Food halls
So
on the go.
exactly,
Like wilderness and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those kind of
spaces,
things. That always blows my mind.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We'll look out for the next sites that you're building and working on. Thank you, everyone. So again, as usual, you can download Beyond the Counter from all of your favourite podcast channels, and please sign up to be kept up to date of the next series, and also just other content that we're putting out via the web page. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.